What's going to be great today is that we're going to give our viewers a little bit of an overview of some of the things that we talked about last time about capacity building. And we're going to go a little bit further this time, but we're also going to really focus on context and application. And that's something that I think, Dr. Harris, that you'll be able to really help us with in really looking at how these principles apply, both at the micro level, but also in terms of the big picture, which I know you know quite a bit about.
Right.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about our last program a little bit. During our previous program, we presented the concept of capacity and building to our viewers and attempted to make a case for why it is important to our work in education. And let's take a few minutes to review some of the highlights of our discussion before we move into our topic today. You know, we frequently see the word capacity in articles and reports on school improvement. Sharon, what is capacity?
Capacity is a set of learned mechanisms that an individual can use to do something, whether it's perform a task or do a specific piece of work that is outlined. But the nice thing about capacity is that it actually can be built, it can be developed. It's not something that's innate, it's a set of learned mechanisms that an individual can use to do a task or a piece of work.
Now, sometimes the word capacity is used interchangeably with the word capability. Is capability the same as capacity?
I'm very glad you asked that question, because you often read articles, and you are correct that capacity and capability sometimes is not only used in the same paragraph, but I've actually seen it used in the same sentence, and they're two very different things. Capability is actually the larger of the two words, and capability is an amalgamation or a blend of two words, one being capacity and the other word is ability. So what capability means is that you have the innate ability to do something that is of interest or is the target of whatever it needs to be accomplished. And capacity is this set of learned mechanisms that I just spoke about. And when you pair your ability to do something with what you've learned in that set of mechanisms, the two together then form your ability or your capability to do something. And your capability is honed when you actually have the experience applying those mechanisms to a set of skills or tasks, and you grow in your expertise in that area. So capability is the larger of the two terms, but they're very different terms.
And I don't think that many people realize that. I think they do look at them as synonyms. And in fact, what you're saying is that they are quite different.
That is correct.
But they are related. You talked about capacities. Are there different kinds of capacities?
There are different kinds of capacities, and generally there are two different major categories. The first category is what's called general capacities, and this is what you often read in the literature when they talk about looking at the number of staff members that a system might have or an organization might have to be able to do the work. It also involves things like the facilities, the buildings, the amount of financial resources that the organization might have. But these are called general capacities, the way that they structure their policies and the kinds of handbooks or regulations that the organization might have to guide the work. But the second type of capacity is the kind of capacity that we work with in helping SEAs develop the skills that they need to be able to do the kind of work now, the complex work that needs to be done. And these are called very specific capacities or initiative-specific capacities. And they're related to the type of work that needs to be done. So there's a whole array of those that you see in the literature, but they're very specific capacities.
Now, one of the things that I've heard you talk about is metacapacity. What is that?
Metacapacity is one of the specific capacities that you'll read about in the literature and that we use in our model. I probably first should tell you about our model so you'll know where metacapacity fits in. We have a multi-dimensional model that we use for capacity building that has 5 types of capacity.
And this is on the screen.
This is on the screen, and the viewer can see this. The first is foundation capacities, and these are capacities that you'll find in every kind of task, whether it's a very small task or a very large task that the organization may want to complete. Then there are enhanced capacities that allow you to take that work beyond the current task that you've defined. There are also higher order capacities that allow you to take the current capacity that you're working with and be more sophisticated in your analysis and your application of those capacities. Then there are proficiency capacities, which are capacities that are designed to help individuals and whole systems of people bring their skill sets to a higher level. And then the fifth and final is what's called learning capacities, and these are capacities that are just the same capacities that you use when you work with children in a classroom. Adults also go through the same kinds of cognitive and emotional and mental processes to learn a new skill. So it's 5 parts. And metacapacity sits within that higher order capacity area, and it's really what I call the grandfather of all of the capacities because it's much larger, much more complex, and much more guiding in its work. And in particular, metacapacity is the ability to have all the capacities that I just talked about and to be able to hone them, fine-tune those capacities to a level of expertise, and then more importantly, be able to use your capacity to build capacity in others.
Would you say that most TA providers have all of those that you're talking about today?
All good TA providers do. They're really very skilled people that have been working in technical systems for a very long time or have the kinds of background in education that would give them lots of experience, would have a huge range of these capacities. And in our work, we look for people who have a large range of these skills so that we have staff that are already at that level that they can do metacapacity work.
Well, I think you're to be commended for not only being able to provide services using these, but also to be able to develop other leaders that can work in schools or that are working in schools or districts or SEAs to be able to do these things. So that's really, really great. Carl, you've had an opportunity to have both a micro and a macro vantage point of public education. You know, you're currently working with Dr. Harsh to deliver training to educational leaders throughout Appalachia around capacity building. And based upon your experience, why is this training that we're doing so critical?
I think it's critical, well, I know it's critical given the fact that we devote a lot of time developing policies that we believe are important to define the organizational's structure or focus. But policies are only good if they are implemented and implemented with fidelity of their intent, and those policies actually get down to the level that they were intended to be administered. So when we talk about or think about capacity building, we're really in the context of the micro, macro, we're talking about the macro level of the policy going down to the micro level of the classroom and being able to actually see that policy take shape and actually is implemented in a way that it makes a significant difference at the classroom level where you have teaching and learning going on.
As you think about your experience, again, in the classroom, you know, all the way up to the Department of Education, can you think of any examples? And if you don't want to share a real example, maybe a fictional example, but one that would be relevant where capacity building really could have made a difference?
Yeah, and I think it's happening, today all over this country. I'll use early childhood education, for example. States are engaged in conversations all around the country about the need for early childhood learning. And in some cases, there are policies that are being put in place that are starting these programs up with an implementation phase. But to actually have the capacity to fund these programs, implement them with fidelity all the way down to either a local level or within a school district level, I've seen over many, many years where there's been a breakdown between what the intent of that policy was and how it was actually implemented at the local level, including the funding that is needed to carry it out.